Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today's chat is with Michael Collins, the de facto expert on sugar addiction. Michael is the founder of sugaraddiction.com and the I Quit Sugar Summit. He's also a board member and past chairman of a nonprofit group that studies sugar and food addiction. I guess what I'm saying is, if you wonder if sugar addiction is a real thing, Michael will set you straight. He's dedicated his professional life to bringing awareness of sugar addiction to people that have health, wellness, or eating issues. He's also authored the Amazon best-selling book, The Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide. So, if you're a coach that believes that sugar is a modern diet scourge, and you want to help people move away from this addictive food product, you'll get a lot out of this episode. We'd love to have you screenshot your podcast player and tag us on Instagram at Health Coach Radio. And by the way, the show notes for this episode and all previous episodes of Health Coach Radio can always be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. Quick sponsorship message for you. No matter what kind of practicing or aspiring health, fitness, or nutrition coach you are, a quit sugar coach, a macro coach, a keto coach, a plant-based coach, the best, most foolproof way to grow your practice, get more clients, and change more lives is simply to be a really masterful coach. This is exactly what I teach our students in the Primal Health Coach Level 2 certification course. Not only will you learn and practice advanced coaching skills, but this course also satisfies the educational requirements to enable you to sit for the NBC HWC credentialing exam, so you can become a board-certified health and wellness coach. Stay tuned to the end of the show where Laura will explain a little bit more about what we teach, how, and why. And in the meantime, head to primalhealthcoach.com/level2 to get more info. It's time to get on with the show. Please enjoy our conversation with Michael Collins. Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh boy, it's going to be good. This is going to be a good one. Coaches listening, buckle up. I'm pretty pumped. Well, Mike, we'd love for you to start by telling us kind of the origin story so that we have a sense of background of who you are, why you're here, what you do. Can you give us that sort of 3 to 5 minute-ish sort of condensed speaker bio?
Yeah, absolutely. I have the podcast version. It usually brings up more questions than it answers, but I was a regular kid, I thought. I mean, everybody kind of grew up with this, which soaked in sugar, if you will. My mom was a sugar junkie, my favorite sugar junkie, and she really thought sugar was love for people. I mean, It's kind of a sad story, really. My grandmother died when she was just 8 years old. So they had to move in with my aunt, her aunt, and basically they owned the country store across the way. And anytime she walked in, they had made a little deal. My grandfather made a little deal that she could have all the candy she wanted, anything, and she didn't have to pay for it. So she just thought that that's where people were, and it was a great gesture for an 8-year-old who lost her mom. But it got her just using sugar anytime she felt bad or sad or whatever. And so anyway, fast forward, and she has us, and we literally had unfettered access to that sugar bowl. We could eat as much sugar. I got that sugar bowl from the estate. I mean, look, we would scrape out like a half an inch of sugar at the end of a cereal bowl. Cheerios. I mean, we were just milk and sugar. Like we're scraping it out, eating it. There's a great video on YouTube. Eric Clapton's talking to Ed Bradley of 60 Minutes, right? And Ed Bradley says, so Eric, this addiction thing started with heroin, right? They're sitting in his $7 million Antigua treatment center that he built for recovering folks. And he says, no, Ed, it started with sugar. And he said, I used to eat bread and butter and sugar sandwiches when I was 5 and 6 years old, and to change my state. Now, remember that as we go on. And that's exactly, we used to eat those things. And brown sugar, I mean, it was crazy. Anyway, fast forward through my whole childhood, I knew where my mother's stash was. Candy was just covered up in the house. Ice cream. We didn't have a ton of money. We would make Kool-Aid with 3 times the sugar, in the drink or whatever. We couldn't afford soda, but we made our own. So about 14 or 15, I run into beer, right? And I knew this changed my state, right? This was something, I was kind of shy, and I would, drink beer and be able to talk to girls and whatever. And so, that party lasted until I was 28 years old. And I'm kind of an open book, and we can talk about that, but that might be another podcast. Anyway, I got sober at 28, and honestly, I went right back to sugar. And so did a lot of the folks that I know who were in recovery. They would gain 50, 60 pounds really fast, really, and get some of them even got diabetes diagnosis in the first couple of years. And anyway, I went on to have a regular life. I read a book right about then called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues is a great story about the history of sugar, slavery, and it just grabbed me. And I was trying to stay healthy, right? So I ended up getting off sugar myself. It took a long time, a couple of years back and forth, sugar, flour, and caffeine. Then somehow I talked my wife at the time into having kids, no sugar, no flour, no caffeine in the womb. And the fight lasted basically till they were about 6. We fought the Montessori school. We fought the grandparents. We fought everybody because they thought we were depriving these kids of a childhood, right? And it was a different era, it was about 30 years ago. And so I went on to have a regular life, basically a regular career. My kids always said, Dad, you need to write a book about sugar. So I did that, and it's on Amazon, right? And I bought the domain sugaraddiction.com about 10 years ago, and I would give out the best information on the planet. And some people would take it, the best research to that date, right? And so then about 3 years ago, I was kind of semi-retired, and I just basically started coaching, and I started, providing groups to Zoom meetings, forums. Now we got like 7,000 people in a forum. And so that's when it took off. That's when I started to realize, and I started to develop the protocols that actually work, after thousands of detoxes. So basically that's the short version of it. I mean, I can fill in any blanks that you need, but that's how I got here. And, it's a different story, but that's my story.
We will for sure fill in some blanks.
Yeah, there's so much. You know what I resonated with immediately was that sugar is love.
Yeah.
That I run into this with, I've worked with, Aaron and I both work predominantly with women, but of the women that I work with, some of my older ones, I would say, 60 and up, this is very common that they get, in their own path to try to quit sugar and eat healthier, they find themselves in a situation where this is how they show love, is by baking cookies. This is what they're known for. My one client, she was known for her famous Italian wedding cookies. And if she didn't show up with the Italian wedding cookies, like all heck was going to break loose, right? Yeah, we had to have a very deep conversation on kind of another way to express how she feels and how to share love and kind of share what she's learning. If you don't mind, I would love to dig into that a little bit more, because
absolutely.
I think it's super common.
It's at the core of my work, a lot of it. The science is wonderful, but what you're describing, the socialization that's evolved over 300 years is as big a part of the problem.
Yep. So where do you think that comes? I mean, so is it really just kind of how we're raised? And if we were raised that way from our parents, that's how this is ingrained? Or is there a little bit, look, I mean, I think when I think back to kind of my grandmother, she was just food is love, period. My grandma, if you went over to her house, again, old school Italian grandma, went over to her house, it was immediately, what can I feed you?
Yeah.
And we would go over on Sundays, and she made these huge, like 5-course meals for a random Sunday, right? We always had soup, and then an antipasto, then we had a pasta, then we had like a protein, then we had a salad in there somewhere, and then always dessert.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Oh wait, so for her, kind of food was love, but interestingly, for Christmas, my cousin sent us out. My grandmother recently passed away, and my cousin got her hands on my grandma's old recipe book, like handwritten recipes, and she put them all in this beautifully bound book for us for Christmas. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like a little piece of my grandma, but it's all cakes, cookies, cheesecake, pies, all of it. Because for my grandma, a lot of the savory stuff she didn't need recipes for.
That's what I was going to say. She probably didn't need recipes. Yeah.
Right. But for baking, she did. And that's all of it. But there's something about food, and in particular sugar and sweets, that's like celebratory. It brings back great memories for people, right?
Yeah.
That is it's a tough one to overcome. And I heard you say that you started coaching.
Yeah.
Right. So could you share with us a little bit as a coach how you help unpack some of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, everything you're describing is an evolutionary process. Dr. Robert Lustig, probably the de facto leader of all this sugar reduction stuff, is, says we're in the middle of a tectonic shift, right? So it's going to take time to unwind all of this 300 years of socialization that evolved sugar from birth to death in every celebration and everything. And now in the 40s and 50s and 60s into the food system where, 85% of the stuff has food in it. And so there's no one in recent memory that remembers the 1700s in England or America when nobody ate. The sugar was a very rare commodity and they just had a little. And so over that time period, we've evolved to eat 150 pounds a year, mainly from the things that you're describing, the socialization of sugar in every single celebration, every single holiday, and pretty much every single day now with sodas and whatever. It's just an evolutionary blip. It's a mistake that now science is proving out, just like seatbelts in cars and drinking and driving. The way out is the awareness that sugar is a drug. It's a psychoactive drug that in the last 5 years, the science has exploded on in the studies of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. Even your adrenal glands are all blasted every single day. I mean, in scientific terms, your dopamine receptors are down-regulated. They're thinned out. You have less of them, right? And there is the part that I get upset about a little bit is that sugar gets no respect as a psychoactive drug, as a drug of abuse, right? When in reality, if you were ever to speak to someone who's lost 200 pounds or 150 pounds or a lot of weight, they go through the same recovery process that a drug addict does. They've got to reorder their emotional life because they have used sugar. Just like my mom, just like the kids, they thought sugar, anxiety. Your mom did it to you, right? She gave you a cookie and pointed to the TV. She was busy. She had a job. She had other kids. And so we are literally trained to use sugar to manage our emotional lives. And this is the part that if people they change and they get recovery and they lose weight. While losing weight is only a small part of the process, and really, we got this saying, come for the come for the vanity, stay for the sanity. Look, people are like, they want to lose weight. They're desperate. But when they really get into this thing, 60, 90 days in, they realize that, and this is what I've discovered, is their literal brain was not working correctly. I mean, and when you do studies, when you do, like Daniel Amen does the brain scan stuff, right? You find that people's brains got little holes in them. Okay, they're like, their brain, it's just been, and the part that's killing me is that this is just not that well known. I love podcasts because they give me 45 minutes or so to set this all up, right? It's not just the diet. It's not just the sugar that's making you heavy or, whatever. It really has to do with the management of your emotions, right? And so people have got to understand that they have to separate these two things, that sugar is only sharing our delivery system, right? It's sharing the delivery system that should have real food in it, right? And so this is, I mean, it takes time to set this funny enough, I have to ease people into this solution because they don't want to hear about addiction. They don't want to hear about their brain chemicals. They just want a food plan and an exercise plan. They do not want to like delve into this emotional life stuff, right? But regardless, it's going to happen anyway. Like anybody can cold turkey, white knuckle, get themselves 5 days, 10 days, 20 days. But until they understand what has happened to them, that they have they have used this product to manage their emotions since they were probably in the womb, but definitely since they were a baby, until they figure this out, until they accept it, not figure it out because I can explain it till I'm blue in the face, but until they accept it, they don't get well. And I've done this 1,000 times over, at least 1,000, maybe more, I don't know. But and people, they fight me, they push back, but this, but that, they want wiggle room, they want all this kind of stuff. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but it's just like, I mean, as a marketer, as somebody that's trying to get this message out to help the kids, because it hurts my heart to watch obese kids. It kills me because they don't go buy food between 1 and 7 or 10, I mean, they just don't, they're not responding, but now they're obese, so their parents are feeding this. So this message has to get out, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this because I was wondering when you were telling your story about how you managed to shield your kids from it up until about age 6.
Yeah.
I was literally just thinking about this the other day because I don't have children myself, but I have these adorable, perfect angel nieces. And as I watch them grow from babies through toddlers and into children, and now they're going to school, and now they're going to be influenced by culture, I was like, oh no, there goes those perfect little angels. What's going to happen to them? Yeah. So I just think that's so fascinating. It's like we are born with like an innate ability to take care of ourselves, and then we get into culture, and cultural influences start to really pile on top of us. So just out of curiosity, what was your kids' experience like, or what was your experience as a parent as soon as your kids started being introduced to sugar, flour, etc.? What was that like?
Yeah, it's very different. And when we have kids, when people ask how to get the kids off, it really is two different things. The kids that have never had it, and then the kids that have already been exposed, and then they would need to get off it. So, but my kids, they never knew what it was, right? Till they're 4 or 5. I mean, we just shielded them, right? And they would go ever see a kid in a grocery cart screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to get to that candy? They're like literally almost tipping the cart over, trying to get to the candy, right? Well, my kids used to build it like blocks. They didn't know this colored blocks to them. They didn't know what it was. So that was great. But then I remember to the day, I still like it's yesterday. We were at a roller skating rink, another outside birthday party, right? And the cake and ice cream came out. And both of them, they were twins, right? So both of them craned their head. They look up at me like saying, Dad, like they didn't even have to say anything. Like, can we this time? We always brought their own snacks. They were different, and, we'd bring out the celery and the carrots and stuff. And so they look and they're like, and we just caved, man. We just caved in. We regain our senses in the next morning. And then they only had sugar until outside the house. They never had it inside the house when they were growing up. And who knows? I mean, I'm sure they probably snuck it, whatever. But, we had got them that far. And the experience socially was very difficult, which brings to the point we were just talking about, that literally people thought we were depriving them, that their child would not be sufficient or good or whatever. And it's just total crap. I mean, my kids, I mean, it would be dad bragging to tell you their life story, but it's kind of astounding, quite really. I mean, it's really, their brain developed better, okay? In those first 1,000 days, from conception to you're 2 years old, the brain grows like thousands of percentages. And I mean, it just is, it's so true. And if I could just get this into people's heads, that they would, I don't know. I mean, the short version is I'm not that smart. I'm smart enough, but I'm not smart like rocket scientist smart, like perfect scores on your college entrance exams. Like no Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, no errors, 0. 1600, right? And one of them works for a quantum computer company. Like, it's like, it just really is kind of, and they never had the draw to sugar. In other words, they like, I could smell beer from 50 paces. They never had alcohol issues. They never had drug issues. They never, and they can just like eat half a piece of cake and it's still sitting there. And I'm like,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So they don't have, and they didn't groove that neural pathway. This information is coming out in the last 5 years, where it literally grooves a pathway in your brain that when you're anxious or when you don't want a sweet, you want a dopamine hit, right? You want a hit of dopamine, and they just never developed that. So
that's interesting, because I was wondering if, like, once they had the cake at the roller rink, if it was like that was it, like now it was going to be a battle. But that's interesting. And actually, your story reminded me of like Laura had babies twice. So she had an older set of kids, and then she had her twins. And she shared before how her young twins were raised in a completely different kind of eating paradigm, and how they never get sick, they pay attention better, like all that kind of stuff. Hey, Laura?
Yeah. And so they really had very little sugar until they were, same thing, birthday party, their first food wasn't cereal, it was egg yolks, like they got real food. But for my kids, the minute they got a taste of that, they wanted more. So my kids are still, can we have it? Can we have it? So there's very little in my house.
Right.
But I do have a few things, like I'll buy them some dried fruit. We have some dark chocolate. But I guess I was always torn between kind of managing their exposure to this kind of stuff. And then what happens once I no longer have control over that? Are they going to go absolutely crazy once they've got, complete control over that? My older two, boy, was that hard, right? So and my situation too is that I was divorced. So there was, I had my aha moment from a health perspective and cleaned up my entire kitchen. But my kids were like, oh gosh, like 10 and 7 kind of, and my ex-husband lived on the pizza, Chinese food, and Oreo diet. And that's what was always at his home. And his mother would again, how you show love. She wasn't a baker, but she could go to Target and pick up Nutter Butters, like the best of them, and Rice Krispie treats. That was the other thing. So every weekend they were getting this kind of food. Meanwhile, they come to mom's house, which is where they lived predominantly. And, it was a constant battle. But in that case, it was really just about negotiation. I knew I was not really going to be able to completely remove this food from them, because I didn't have a complete control. I had this other factor. But now that they're older, my son in particular is very conscious about making healthier choices other than the beer. He's 22. He's 22 and he's in that stage. But my daughter, Mia, she's got these, and I'm starting to recognize it now for what it is now that I'm married to an addict, but she has these tendencies now that I notice Brad has, as far as seeking solace in food and sugar in particular and things of that nature. And it's a little bit harder for her. Whereas with my other two, like they'll tell neighbors, I'm sorry, I can't have that. That's not good for me.
Right.
Or that's really just sugar. But to your point, like socially, it is really awkward, but once people get to know us, and I'm just speaking in terms of folks listening who are like, gosh, how do I make this transition? Or coaches listening, like, how do I help my client over this transition period? The hard part is just that when this is new to everybody else around you. But over time, everyone that knew me knew that this is the way I ate. It just became no big deal after a while.
Right. And that's what people don't realize, that people aren't paying much attention to what you're eating. People think that that they'll have to navigate this minefield, but it really isn't that way. There's an interesting book that just came out. We interviewed this guy on our summit. We have this Quit Sugar Summit every year. And Dr. Michael Gorin works at, he actually has the Gorin Lab at USC. He's been studying childhood obesity for 30 years. And he's not quite as radical as I am, but there's some real good tips in Sugarproof, and it's at sugarproofkids.com. So that's a good reference for your folks to check out. But I really believe what's happened, and we discussed it earlier, is this, and you talk about the addiction piece of it. I come from an addiction recovery background. So I looked at it at that lens, and even all these researchers, they're not willing to accept that. They're not willing yet to dive into that. Whereas I've had experience with, recovery meetings that center around food and that kind of thing. And I've seen how even back 30 years ago, it looked very clear to me that I was abusing these things exactly the way I abuse drugs, right? And so the science now is bearing out the anecdotal evidence of people who have just stayed off it for the last X amount of years. But now, in the last 5 years, that science has just exploded. That brain science of the way that stuff hits the nucleus accumbens, the way that it lights up. They've literally slid people into MRIs and have them drink syrupy drinks, and then gave them alcohol or whatever. And the same exact places light up. Right. It's like the brain, people are now realizing that the brain is driving the show here, right? And the science is finally proving out these anecdotal recovery methods or dieting methods that have worked, right? And so I think the thing, like I said before, is to try and get this message out to people, the science out to people, so that they're not confused anymore. Because today people still believe in the old calories in, calories out, that it has something to do with, Primal Health is a perfect example, that people believe that, you eat less calories, you exercise more, and then all of a sudden you're going to lose weight, right? And the scientific lore around this construct that people who lose a lot of weight, 90% of them gain it all back in the first year. And the reason they gain it all back has to do with exactly what we're talking about. They white knuckled it. They have muscle memory. They could exercise back to their high school weight or whatever. But when the first time 6 months later, when a death happens, a divorce happens, a financial calamity happens, their anxiety ramps up, and they don't have not enough exercise in the world to quell that anxiety that they have trained over 30, 40, 50 years to use sugar to quell it. That's how they go back and gain all the weight, because they're using this substance to help them feel better. You're not looking for a sweet hit. You're looking for a dopamine hit,
Yeah. Okay. I want to frame up a coaching question for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, before we pressed record on this podcast, I said, I don't think I deal with people who have sugar problems, but now that I think about it, yeah, I do. And so sometimes I get clients who will say, I just need a little something sweet in the evening after something. Yeah. Right. I must hear that. I must hear that from every client. Now that I think about it.
I've heard that 10,000 times.
I know.
Yeah,
first of all, I love that language. It's like, oh, you need it.
Yeah.
But so these folks will have come to me and declared that their evening snacking habit is kind of what they believe is what's holding them back. And yet they'll say, but I really do need something sweet, or I'd like something sweet. So then what they'll do is say, can I have like a healthy alternative, like a artificially sweetened something or other? And my stance is no, because you're closing. Like, this is now a conditioned response. I need something sweet. And then I'm eating a thing that tastes sweet, even though there's actually no sugar in it. It tastes sweet. So you're satisfying that desire, that behavior, I guess, and sort of making like that Pavlovian response in the brain. So when I guess I'm snarky as a coach, because I touched on this earlier, I don't have a sweet tooth. I don't struggle with sugar addiction or any kind of addictive tendencies, really. And so when my clients come to me and are trying to like Band-Aid or have some wiggle room on their sweet tooth, it's like, no, you just got to go cold turkey. Don't even have sweet tasting things. Don't have a Diet Coke. Don't have a keto cookie. Don't.
Right.
But
that's good advice.
Okay, is it? Because technically there's no sugar in here, but is it still lighting up the dopamine receptor though? You know what I mean? Like,
well, so let's kind of move down the chain, if you will. And the part that's hard that like everybody comes in, they want to quit the sugar, but when I inform them that they got to quit the flour too, and the sweet tastes, right? Because like Pavlov's dogs that you mentioned, once we get a little bit of monk fruit or keto cookie or whatever, this, you call it wiggle room, is exactly what I call it. Same thing. Look, I just say, can we play adult here for a minute? Just can we just adult for a minute?
And say the same thing.
Look, you came to me to figure this out, right? And just give me, I call it buying into Mikey's fantasy. I said, can you just give me 30, 60 or 90 days? That's all I'm asking for. I call it a scratch test. Like if you go to an allergist, they'd scratch it for ragweed and pollen and stuff. Here's your scratch test. Here's your test to see if biochemically your body doesn't handle sugar well. And I don't know if it says in my bio, but I was a past chairman of the board of a food addiction institute, right? And I'm still on the board. And the information coming out, they're trying to get food addiction and sugar addiction named into the DSM-6 or 7 when it comes out, right? And so coming out of that is a third of people cannot biochemically handle this product without creating a sense of craving and wanting more. Mm-hmm. It's not good. It's not bad. It just is. And right. If you become an adult and you figure this out and you say, all right, I'll accept it for now and try it your way. I've never got anybody past 90 days with no flour, no sugar and caffeine who went back.
Right.
Skin looked better. They were coming towards their goal weights or whatever. Their brain fog cleared up. Now they may slip down the line, but they always come back. We have effectively screwed up their sugar use because now they've seen the experiment in action. They've had all these good results. They feel better than they've ever felt in their life. And that's what always happens when they come back. We call them retreads. We leave the door wide open for them to come back. They say, I felt so good when I was doing this, and then I fell off because I didn't keep the social structure up. I didn't keep the social support up. I went back into my family of origin or my friends or my workmate or my schoolmates, and I felt the odd man out. I didn't feel like I was a part of the group anymore. And that's usually, like we were talking about earlier, what drew them back. Plus the fact that like I said, if some emotion comes up, a crisis comes up, and they just say, well, a little won't hurt. And that's always, if you ever hear just, you got to look for the words just a little, just a sip, just a slice, just this once, all these justs. When that comes up, they're on their way back out.
Yes. Just is a really big, actually, just to touch on that, just is a word that coaches should listen out for all the time.
Yeah.
It's really, it's like, oh, tap the brakes. I'm not letting you get away with that one. Hang on.
It's minimizing language, right?
Yes.
It's
just like your my little sweet at night. I actually think it's at night they're taking it to relieve the anxiety of the day, but then to pass out because that'll knock them out. And it creates a time release thing, like a time release capsule, so that moves sugar through your body for the whole rest of the next day until you need to take it again. So
yeah,
it's a weird kind of thing.
So what's interesting is I own a CrossFit affiliate, and when I first started there, I would run, besides my coaching clients, in order to try to lure people into my coaching program, I would run these challenges, 30-day challenge, 21-day challenge. Nice. We did the whole life challenge, this kind of stuff. And one that we did was the 21-day sugar detox by Diane Sanfilippo. Sure. And Whole30 is similar to this too. No, I take that back. Whole30 allows fruits and stuff. Right. But the sugar detox is literally nothing sweet, not even berries. You can have lemons and limes and unripe bananas. They have to be green, unripe bananas. And you can have, what else there was, but very, very little. Yeah. I had a bunch of people go through it, including my husband. And every single person said by the end, their taste buds literally changed and they could appreciate the sweetness in things like carrots, tomatoes, and that a berry that they once used to put sugar on now tastes very sweet. Right. Yeah. But again, it was a 21-day deal. And the whole point was, great, let's keep this going, but nobody had an interest in keeping it going. They just kind of, but they always end up coming back. But this is why it's so important from a coaching perspective to understand programs like that is not coaching. It's an educational opportunity. It's a great marketing opportunity. It allows people to have an aha moment. But it's the reason why the coaching program we recommend is 12 weeks long. Because it really takes that long to go from, oh my gosh, metabolically things are different. My taste buds have changed, but my behaviors are still being practiced. They're not fundamentally changed into habits yet. And at the end of the day, Erin, with your point, can I have this kind of, the artificial sweetener? If the goal is just to lose weight, that's one thing. But if the goal is really to change your relationship with food and to make something sustainable long term.
Yeah. No, I mean,
that's important.
I used to have a marketing campaign about the detoxes, like the 10-day, 21-day, 3-day, 5-day, 7-day, 30-day, how they're wrong. And they are wrong because exactly what you just said. You pick somebody up, you drop them off in no man's land on day 22, and they're lost, right? And they white knuckled, especially CrossFit folks, which I love too. They got muscle memory. They can go right back to it. But until during that process, if they don't substitute a walk, a run, a workout, yoga, a hug, making love, whatever, if they don't change their behavior, that when they feel this anxiety, this worry, and if they don't connect the two, if they don't make this connection, if they don't understand why they were reaching for the sugar, and it has nothing to do with sweet, because you say the sweet process of sweet taste, they all change. So until they figure that part out, then they can't move forward. They can't make it a lifestyle. That's the basics. They can't make it a lifestyle.
I want to touch on that. So one sort of philosophy that I subscribe to is that if I can change my client's biochemistry, which I think is easier to change, honestly, than behavior.
Interesting. Yeah.
I do. Like, for example, if you go for 30 days, like you said, try for 30 days, just try cold turkey for 30 days and just see what happens. Well, your cells learn how to use different fuel. They're not calling out for sugar, which is that cheap, fast, and easy preferential fuel. The cells figured out how to maybe tap into stored fat or ketones or something. So there's a biochemical change, which then makes it easier to kind of like say, oh, I don't really feel like I need that sugar or want it or need it or whatever it is. That's kind of how I approach it. So whenever I work with clients, I'm like, let's just get your cells working and fueled properly. And then we'll talk about some of these behaviors and some of these things. But you're talking about getting people to connect to the fact that they're getting an emotional release or response or connection to this food choice. So do you start with that? Do you start with people really facing their emotional facets of their sugar addiction, or how do you
it's a great question. It's a great question. And it's half and half a little bit. The process it's required, necessary that during the physical detox, and there is physical detox, that's kind of like another myth that you're not having hard detox. I mean, your headaches, hangry, lethargic, and you're a little bit depressed because now you don't have the manual stimulation of your dopamine and serotonin. Let's look at SSRIs, serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, Paxil and all these kind of things that people take for depression. What they're trying to do is they're trying to dial in take a half of this, we'll take this, well, let's try this one. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, we'll try that. So they're trying to dial in how you feel, right? And what we're doing unconsciously, and just because the stuff is ubiquitous and free, we're dialing that in with sugar and caffeine and flour every day. We're trying to I got to go into this meeting. I got to have a cup and a half of coffee. I can't have 4 because I'll be crazy. And I can't not have any because I'll be in withdrawal. So we're trying to dial this in all day, every day with our sugar and flour and caffeine and stuff. And so if you, during the process of coming off physically, start to introduce this learning, this necessity to do something different when you feel the need for sugar, be it a walk, a run, yoga, go to CrossFit, whatever it is, then you start to default to this thought, I'm a little hungry. Well, let me go for I'm a little sweet. Let me go for a walk. And so you change the pattern of your emotional life, literally change the pattern. I'm sure you guys go through this. I know I do. I can go 2 or 3 days without a walk or a run or a workout. And I'm a little, I got to have a run. I got to go I got to do something because I just don't feel right. And most people in this society, 90+% of them, when they feel that, they ingest a substance like a flour, sugar, or caffeine. And until they, Tony Robbins, pattern interrupt that until they break it apart and realize what's happened, journal it out, talk it out with the people in the program. Say, yes, last night my husband was an ass, and then blah, blah, blah. And I was headed towards the cookie jar, and I remembered you guys, and I went for a walk. Until that happens, they're still going to be sentenced to using sugar.
Right. I want to touch on one more thing, because this is just something that I'm struggling with, honestly, on a personal level.
Yeah.
Is, okay, instead of having my sweet treat, I'm going to go crush a workout. I'm going to go have a run. Are we replacing, like, I worry that we're creating exercise addicts.
Right. So look, I mean, I'm very familiar with exercise addiction. I'm very familiar with substituting one for the other. Okay. At the end of the day, this is addictive disorder. This is, people will do exactly what you're describing, and they will substitute lots of things, especially workout, and especially ex-athletes. And that doesn't end well, because now they've been using exercise as much as they could when they were on the sugar. Now they got no sugars. They're doubling up on their exercise, right? So yes, you have to warn, and you have to keep an eye out for that. And exercise addiction is, look, I heard this great thing the other day. I forget the guy's name, but he said, the brain doesn't care. The brain's making love, or the brain's way to love itself. That's what he said. The brain's way to love itself is to get a dopamine hit. It doesn't care if it's illicit sex, gambling, drugs, illegal drugs. It doesn't care. Yeah. It just wants its hit. And we've trained it in different ways. Everyone's different how they train to get that dopamine hit. But what it's done is veer off of what we evolved to do, which is for procreation, for finding different foods, you get a dopamine hit. For finding healthy foods or eating healthy foods, you get a little dopamine hit. And, regular, not addictive exercise. So until people kind of get that. So yes, in essence, I do have to teach, or I have to at least inform people of the other possible. Look, people end up gambling. They literally end up gambling when they're getting off sugar. And, you got to walk them back from that too. So you can't switch one for the other. And the thing is that people do, like Rodney Dangerfield, right? I get no respect, right? Sugar gets no respect can be in that category, right? It just doesn't get any respect. Right. That the possibility exists that it could be one of those things that we've been talking to mention.
Yeah.
But we remember the tripolar guy that we interviewed.
I know,
Aaron,
that's
right?
kind of
right. So we talked to him. So now, to be fair,
yeah,
this is somebody who is a lifelong addict, and he has suffered from mental illness. So for some of our coaches, a portion of what he's going to need is outside of our scope, right? However, for him, we had this conversation of, for someone who is truly an addict, like, so a person comes to you, they want a health coach because they want help getting healthy. And part of their discovery is, look, I'm an addict, I'm seeking help for this, what have you. We were asking him if he felt, for that kind of individual, is it really even realistic to tell them, well, you just have to, you can't, for him, what he was saying was, you almost need a replacement, at least in the beginning, from our point of view. And for him, it was exercise. And, he's doing well, but he also admitted at some point his body's going to break down, and he's going to need to find something else to replace it with. Right. Sure. But that's kind of like a whole other category, right? This is someone severe,
No, I see. I think, I don't mean to disagree, but I really believe that, as I said, that it just doesn't get respect in that category, in these categories. I'll tell you a true story. Okay. So when my parents were alive, I came up as an abstinence-based guy in anonymous programs. Let's put it that way. And I never told anybody. It's none of anybody's damn business, right? I didn't tell people about my drug and alcoholism and all. I just didn't. It's not their business. So when my parents passed away, I started to realize that I followed a little bit of what's called the recovery advocacy movement, where if people tell their story, then more people hear it. If they can relate, then maybe more people will get help. That made perfect sense to me, right? And so I kind of got on board with it. And actually, one of my mentors is kind of big in that movement. But when I did that and I started talking about it openly and online, I got this flood at sugaraddiction.com of recovering addicts, people who had been sober 5, 10, 15. One of my coaches has been sober 20 years, and she had just never put 2 and 2 together. She'd even been to the food group meetings, the actual recovery addict meetings, and it never stuck, right? So these people are 5 years, and I've been on at least 20 addiction recovery podcasts where the host says to me, you know, Mike, I've been sober for 10 years, but I can't put the sugar down.
Yeah.
And so that not being in the same category is the error of our evolution. It's the error of the socialization of sugar, the acceptance of sugar, that you can give this to a baby, a 1-year-old, with no legal, moral, or ethical ramifications, right? And so that is the science, that is the knowing, that is the message that needs to get out there, you know? And yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. I mean, I have had so many people get off of anti-anxiety and depression meds. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I don't tell them to do this. They do it of their own volition because they go back to the doctor and they think, I don't really need it. But this is after they've been a year or longer off sugar, because it was toying with, playing with their emotions, sending them down a rabbit hole, bringing them back up. And, you know, at the end of the day, when they got off the sugar and they healed, their brain actually healed. And the brain does have to heal. It doesn't just magically appear. It takes time. It takes a year, maybe 2 sometimes, depending on how much damage you've done. And they get off those meds. So, and I've had people go into remission diabetes too. I mean, it's like, it's not rocket science anymore. Virta Health, I'm sure you guys are familiar with. I mean, Virta's got $1 billion valuation, and they've healed like hundreds of peer-reviewed studies of people with just diet. And this extends to the brain, it extends to the addiction stuff. So
I want to get into what coaches can take away from this conversation, but the final sort of thing that I have noodling in my head is a client that I had who, like we've been talking about, a recovering addict from drugs, and she went from drugs to alcohol, then from alcohol to something else, and then now she's addicted to sugar. And one thing that she would say on our coaching calls all the time is, I'm an addict, I need to have something. So if you're going to take this away from me, what do I have left? I have no joy. I can't have a drink. I can't go to the casino and I can't go to the racetrack. You know, like she couldn't do anything. It was the only thing left that was going to bring her this dopamine hit. So what do you do with that kind of thing? Do you like, is it a question of inventorying maybe with clients, other things that bring pleasure? Is there an educational component? What sort of stuff do you work through with clients like that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it comes back to that adulting thing. It's like, they're just fighting for wiggle room. They're just fighting to keep their drug. It's a classic addiction symptom called denial. You know, they're just not willing to accept it. And this is what I struggle with day in and day out. This is the hard part, right? This is the part where they ask every single question to get out of it. It's like a drug addict, you know, every single question to not stop drinking or not stop using their substance, right? And it's not easy. But really, I think and I don't want to get all woo or psychiatry on you, but they've got to think for a deeper meaning in their life. You know, they've got to dig a little deeper. The idea, I mean, you guys can attest, I'm sure. I know I can, and a lot of my clients can. Is like I could not have had the life I mean, if you guys knew my family background and where I come from, to, you know, looking at the Pacific Ocean here, you're not, you can't imagine what sobriety or, you know, recovery is given to me. And the same thing applies with sugar addiction and sugar people, that it's really not about what they eat or how much they weigh. It's about who they want to become and who they are and where they're headed and what they want in their life. And most people as coaches, that may be out of our purview, but I don't think it is.
No,
I really don't
think it is. We talk about that kind of stuff all the time.
I think what you touched on was really interesting, is that clients use this is approach versus avoidance type language. And clients are like, I don't want to have this, or I can't have this anymore. And they're focusing on what they're not allowed to have or what they're not having anymore, rather than what they could have, what's available to them if and when they overcome these these behavioral and psychological hurdles, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it's like the coaching, the future pacing, right? It's like coaches are told in coaching classes to future pace. So like, what's your why, right? Digging into their why. Why would you want to do that? I mean, I'm always saying, you want to dance at your grandchildren's wedding, you want to, get into your high school jeans, whatever it is. I mean, that's how I get them started. But as they go a little further, and I used to work with this Olympic athlete, right? And she placed in the Olympics. This woman could do anything with her body, right? But she could not get off of the sugar. And we come to find out it was the caffeine. But as we matured in our kind of talks, we found out that it was really about exactly what we're talking about. She was afraid to take the next step, where she was following this one, she was a chiropractor by then, and she was following this one chiropractor, and she really wanted to be a speaker, and she was afraid that she wasn't ready to do that. And so that took 3 or 4 months to get to that, for her to open up about that. But I mean, it's that deep why. It's that deep, right. What am I afraid to do? What am I afraid of that I can become, And again, I don't want to get all Tony Robbins on you, but it is important to have a point in the future that they're looking at, they're looking for. Because just because I don't have any joy, if they're looking at the only joy in their life is sugar, then we need to do our jobs a little bit, we need to draw them out a little bit more, I guess. I don't know.
So you mentioned Robert Lustig. So I read his book, The Hacking of the American Mind. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it, because he really explains everything you were talking about in the beginning, as far as sort of the neurotransmitters and everything that's happening when we eat sugar and any kind of addictive behavior. Actually, he really digs into this. And one of the points he was making in that book is how people mistake pleasure for joy.
Yeah.
That they're two very different things. That dopamine is a pleasure neurotransmitter, whereas serotonin is really joy. And so I can see a fantastic coaching conversation here with clients about really being able to identify the difference between those things. Let's talk about the things that, the idea of this food just makes me happy. Does it really? It provides you with a short-term little feeling of pleasure and dopamine, but how do you feel afterwards?
Yeah.
Let's define happiness. What things outside of food that have nothing to do with food that truly bring you joy? And then what things outside of food bring you pleasure, and be able to kind of identify the difference there. And that might be, I'm thinking one bridge out of, I'm just thinking and working with my own husband, from kind of getting him away from these behaviors into something that's truly fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know, your opinion there on if we can get clients to really reach for joy, true happiness, and the difference between, oh my gosh, that was so good, I have to have it again, to, wow, that was really great. Like, I'm good. I'm satisfied now. That's the difference.
Yeah. I mean, Rob's explanation is that spot on, and he's just 100% right. And the issue sometimes too is that the sugar is affecting the serotonin. It's throwing it off as well. And I mean, absolutely. And again, it becomes deeper work, and it has to be installed during the initial detox, because if you do the short-term ones and the white knuckle ones and the restriction ones, and just that's the only thing you do and the only thing you focus on. Like I said, people ask for the food plan, and for the most part, all of the short-term diet stuff is talking about food. This is only about 10% about the food. I'm serious. It's really only that's about the right ratio. You got to eat whole food, and people can even do this on the vegetarian diet. It's rarer, but it can be done. But the rest of it is all the stuff we've been talking about, all the stuff that is, what a coach, a good coach do. They can see something in the person that they cannot see themselves, and they can help to draw it out.
Awesome. Gosh, there's so much more we can talk about here. I want to kind of shift to maybe resources for coaches. If we had a coach, I think we do have lots of coaches actually, even in our community, that want to specialize in this sugar detox, sugar coaching space.
Yeah.
Where do you encourage them to start learning about this stuff?
Sugaraddiction.com. No. Look, I just bought sugardetox.com too. So look, this is, we're going to have certifications. We're going to have all that stuff. And again, it's not going to focus on the food. It's not going to focus on the exercise. I'll let you guys handle that. You know, I mean, this is going to be a special, like yoga, right? In the 90s, there's going to be a sugar addiction coach in every CrossFit box, in every yoga studio, in every gym. There's going to be an office for the sugar addiction coach, and people are going to sign up for it as well. This is coming like a freight train. I mean, I've been doing this Quit Sugar Summit for 6 years now. So they're 6th year. And, you know, we had Dr. Lustig, Gary Taubes, we had all the guys on there. And so I can see the amount of coaches that write us and want to be on the, you know, the presentation and tell their way of doing it, kind of thing. And so, you know, it's just going to happen. It's already happening. Mm-hmm. And so, and I think it's a valid addition to any coaching practice. I mean, I think it's very necessary, because I honestly believe that it's the answer. And I don't want to sound like crazy about it, but that if you can do that, you don't even need to exercise. I mean, I'm not against it, but I want to make a differentiation. When I ask people to exercise, it has nothing to do with weight loss. It has nothing to do with calories or finding a goal weight. It has to do with rehabbing their brain. It mm-hmm. has to get them back to feeling the way they should feel. And so, you know, the addition of this to any coaching program, I think would be really cool.
I think so too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to everything we just talked about. And, you know, I don't think I think this is so much more recognized and acknowledged today compared to, you know, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of debates out there about how, because we get this a lot, you know, the whole, if it fits your macros crowd, you know, you can have the look, the feeling, blah, 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 as long as it fits your macros. And we also get the whole everything in moderation crowd. You also get if it's too restrictive, it's not sustainable.
I would like to address that if you let me for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for 40 years, the eating disorder community has said just that you are not well if you demonize a food, any one food. So that in order to recover, you have to eat sugar and flour in moderation. You have to be able to eat sugar and flour in moderation, which is the antithesis, the exact opposite of people that I know for 30 years have worked with late stage food addicts, of people who have lost 200 and 300 pounds and have gone through this, basically a drug recovery. They've gone through this recovery. They are now at a right sized body, and they've successfully helped thousands, probably tens of thousands of people. And the goal of the Food Addiction Institute, it's a nonprofit, is to get these eating disorder specialists to understand that this is not an eating disorder. This is a substance use disorder, very similar to drug addiction. And this delineation, this separation is coming in the world of change, or, you know, recovery in general, addiction recovery in general, eating disorder treatment centers. Now, right now, you cannot be treated for sugar addiction. Just recently have you been able to be treated and put it on your insurance. Just recently have been able to be treated for binge eating disorder, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's this separation, and to be honest, and I'm probably going to create some enemies here, but nutritionists are the worst because they believe in moderation as well, right? And look, some people, the numbers break down pretty almost identical. They track with the obesity numbers. 1/3 of people, and that's just a rough average of people, biochemically cannot ingest this product without having a reaction of more and more and more cravings, and then they just go on a run.
Right. 1/3
of people are what we call harmful users. Those folks have, through this culture that we talked about, have been, they just overused it. And possibly they could get that 90-day break and then go back to having it a couple times a year, no problem. They just need to get control of it. And then 1/3 of people are normies. They're people who just are not like a person who can have one drink and have no problem. So, but I also want to make a clarification on the normies. there are a lot of very thin sugar addicts. There are
Right.
a lot of people who that, you know, what is it, TOFI, fat on the, or what is it? Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. You know, they got fatty liver, they got it around their organs, but they appear to be fine. And this happens in carb loading bodybuilders as well. You know, they're carb loaded for a long time, then they got, you know, they end up with fatty liver. So, you know, like I say, I like podcasts simply because they give us time to go through this. We don't have a meat is murder. We don't have a friends don't let friends drive drunk. I can't do it in a sound bite. You know, I can't go the whole story in a sound bite. So that's why I appreciate going on, especially to folks like yours that are educated and are affecting a lot of people, you know?
For sure.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about how like the death knell of any sort of weight loss journey is hunger.
Yeah.
Right. The minute they're hungry, you're kind of, you know, because then cravings ensue. Sure. Right. Versus the magic pill, if you will, is satiety. And sugar is not satiating. It's not. It doesn't last long. It doesn't fill you up. It might make you feel temporarily, like it might light you up temporarily, that short-term pleasure. But you know, what we have to work towards with our clients is feelings of satiety and serenity.
Yeah.
And sugar for so many people, majority of people, I would argue, is the antithesis of that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's that short, just like cocaine. I mean, and when you get to be the point of an adult, you're really just fighting off withdrawals. You're not really looking to even get the buzz that kids get. You know, I mean, everybody's got a sugar buzz when they just overdid it and their fingers are tingling and they're like, they can't settle down. But, you know, when we get to be adults, we're just looking to take the edge off. Chocolate's good for that because it gets a little sugar and a little caffeine, you know, a cup of coffee or Coke, the same kind of thing. Just kind of takes the edge off for a minute. But the problem is when you get to be an adult, it only lasts 20 minutes and it's over with, like you said. And so you got to go it again. You got to go it again. And that doesn't end well either. So, yeah.
Oh, such a slippery slope. It's so interesting. And like the thing too is that we are evolutionarily designed. We're wired to want to, you know, avail ourselves of the honeypot, right? And so there's almost sometimes I hear people justifying that, using it as justification. Well, that's how we're wired. We're wired to want the, you know, the occasional just like binge of sugar. And it's like, that doesn't mean that it's a suitable behavior to engage in for a lifetime.
Yeah, no, I can cleave that apart as well. And there's a great video on YouTube called "Is Fruit Good for You?" Gary Fettke, Fettke, right? And the exactly what you described. Like, there's nothing in nature that has fructose in it that's poisonous, so we are drawn to it. And so once a year, maybe if you're willing to get stung by a bee 400 years ago, you could get a little fructose. Or you could get these little crab apples and maybe have or a little, those blueberries that really are kind of bitter, but what has happened, and Dr. Fettke does it better than I do, but it's like we have hybridized these things for sweetness, for the fructose, right? And it's the fructose that affects the nucleus accumbens. It's not, everybody knows what the glucose does, diabetes, heart disease, metabolic syndrome. We all know what that does. But the science now is about the fructose and dried fruit, fruit juice, a lot of fruit, binging on fruit. That just keeps the cravings alive, you know. And let's look at a navel orange, for God's sakes. Let's look at a seedless grape. This thing could not propagate in nature. It couldn't reproduce. Right. It's going to be dead after one cycle. And so we've literally created these processed foods that are just giant fructose bombs, right? And I get a lot of pushback on the fruit, on the fruit. But the only reason I am adamant about it is because it keeps setting up the cravings for the hard stuff. I call it the sugar, you know, if you're getting that little fructose hit. And I think I call the people that are the early adopters in this canaries in the coal mine. They're the sensitives. They're sensitive to this stuff. And they may fall in that third of people who just can't biochemically do it without setting up the craving. So it's hard. I mean, we're early in a long-term game, a societal shift that's going to happen. It was an evolutionary turned on a wrong road started with processed foods. Interesting history lesson is that, you know, the processed food stuff started after World War II, when the guys that created the K rations for the troops had to have a business after the war ended. And so they started doing, the food stuff. And it even goes further back. Dr. Fecky's wife talks about Kellogg and creating cereals and all that kind of stuff, and creating the Nutrition Society, which they were Seventh-day Adventists. To follow it back, you can see, and I'm always a big proponent of this, we can't figure out how to get out of this until we figure out how we got in it. And when you follow that thread of history back, and the slavery and the sugar, I mean, it becomes obvious after you study it,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. I learned a lot. Here.
Me too.
And I feel sheepish that earlier in this conversation, before I pressed record, I said, my clients don't really struggle with this. I don't really struggle with it. Of course we do. We're all struggling with this. This is a cultural scourge. So I'm grateful that we got to learn about it from you, and grateful that you do this work.
Well, you guys are the greatest. I've been a follower of Primal stuff for a long time. And I think you guys are, doing great things out there. And I'm really happy you were able to get me on. I like it.
Yeah.
No, it's been great. So I know we're going to have a lot of coaches listening who agree with everything that we've just said, and they want to learn more. And I'm sure they're going to want to turn to you for resources. So first stop would be is it sugaraddiction.com or sugaraddict.com?
Sugaraddiction.com, right.
Okay. And that you're coming out with some sort of a actual certification?
We are. We actually have a class in training right now, the first class of training people that are going to be sugar coaches. And, there really is, we call it peer recovery, as I mentioned before. It's, one person helping the other person. It's and it's necessary because you're building a community. You're not necessarily doing you are doing one-on-one coaching, but you have to also avail yourself of the community that is building. And I'm not the only one in the community. There's other people now that are doing this, lots of other people. But yeah, sugaraddiction.com. We like to have the folks pass through the process first. They like to see to go through and make sure their own sugar is in check, kind of thing, kind of promote from within. But we are exploring the idea of, certified coaches like yourself to become sugar certified folks too. So
yeah. So any particular resources on that website folks should be looking for?
I've got a book that's been on Amazon for a while. Now we give it away free. So they can check that out. They can download the book. Just a big yellow picture of the last resort sugar detox. The reason we call it the last resort is because the numbers that we've polled now, the average person has done 6.8 different diets, sometimes more. And I think a lot more. I think people underreport. And, so this is the last house on the block kind of thing. This is like, if you've tried everything else, then maybe, and here I heard this kind of sums it up, is she's a coach of mine now, but I did a testimonial with her, and she said, what do you think tripped the trigger? What changed? She had been a Weight Watchers leader. She'd been everything, she'd done like 16 different diets. And she was at Weight Watchers with her mother at 16. And so, but she'd never fallen to a right size body. And she said, I thought I was above addiction. And that's basically the answer. It's like, she thought, this can't be me. After 20 some odd years of struggling, this can't be me. And I empathize with that. I mean, I thought that in my early days too. This can't be me. But it's a charged word. It's an emotion charged word. People think of a guy with a brown paper bag under a bridge. But I want folks to think about nicotine, not heroin, not alcohol. This is a niggling, nasty little addiction that's hard for people to quit if they don't understand or have help.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. This was so great. And I know I'm going to go check it out. I'm sure many of our listeners will. So thanks you very much for your time. We love it.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.
Well, if you've been listening at Health Coach Radio, you'll know that we're all about raising the voices of practicing health, fitness, and nutrition coaches, but most importantly, helping to further legitimize this exploding industry. Erin and I have disclosed often that we're on the faculty of the Primal Health Coach Institute, founded by none other than the health and wellness legend Mark Sisson. And we've interviewed dozens of guests from just about every different health coaching program you can think of, and who practice in just about any conceivable way you can think of. But our allegiance is to the health coaching industry in its totality, first and foremost. It's our desire to continuously and unapologetically lift and promote this industry that nudged us to create this podcast for you in the first place. It's this same yearning that encouraged us to take the educational offering at our health coaching school to the next level. We are so proud to offer the Primal Health Coach Level 2 certification course, which, when combined with our primary course, the Primal Health Coach certification course, not only satisfies the educational requirements to sit for the board exam, but is specifically designed to teach advanced coaching mastery. You will work closely with a small class of peers through this 12-week, very intensive, live online classroom experience to learn how to execute a coaching relationship that is truly transformational. You'll learn and practice how to ask powerful questions, what it means to hold space for your clients, but most importantly, how to actually do it. You'll learn about the craft of motivational interviewing and the nuances of habit change, goal setting, and accountability, and how to nurture your client's own inner knowing, their intuition, and their own self-efficacy, so that they will graduate from your care a truly transformed person. You want a big, successful, powerful coaching practice. And maybe you're devouring our episodes looking for the silver bullet that's going to launch your business into the upper echelons. We've said it a million times and we'll say it again. Your coaching skills are what will make or break you and set you apart for success in this field. So if you're looking to level up your coaching skills and maybe dial up your credential and become a board-eligible health coach, look no further. You can learn more about PHCI's Level 2 program at primalhealthcoach.com/level 2. But if you would value talking to a real person about your path to being a masterful coach and perhaps a board certified coach, book some time with me personally. You can access my calendar at primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or just call me. You can reach me at 844-307-7662. Thank you for listening to Health Coach Radio, and I hope I get to talk to you soon.